Company dismissed. Thank you very much.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Sky Blues History Podcast, the show where we deep dive into the rich tapestry of Coventry City. And as always, I'm joined with the driving force behind it all, the man with the stats, stories, and the sky blue soul, but more importantly, the memories and the memory, actually, the one and only Jim Brown. Good evening, Jim.
Good evening, Claudio.
Good evening, and I'm more than happy to be his trusty number two. But tonight, we're really pleased to have with us a very special guest, a player who established himself and was a key figure in the early 90s at Coventry City, and of course, that first season in the Premier League. And he established himself after Coventry at Sheffield Wednesday, Bradford City, had a fantastic career before finishing his playing career off at Halifax Town. Of course, that's Mr. Peter Atherton. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening.
Really, really good for you to take the time to come on this. But recently, he was the assistant manager at Bolton Wanderers, working alongside Ian Evatt, who, of course, is a proud Coventry City supporter and, by all accounts, an ex-schoolboy from Cannon Castle. By my reckoning, Ian would have been at Highfield Road on the terraces watching our guest in action. So, first of all, Peter, I just need to ask, did he ever mention that he watched you, and did he prefer Peter billing over you?
To be fair, we knew about each other in football, but we'd never met personally until I joined him at Barrow as his assistant. But yeah, he told me he used to watch me from the terraces when he was about 10 years of age. So long time ago now. But yeah, he never said I was one of his favourites. But no, all good humour. And I believe the school he went to, I think Madison's from there. I think there was a number of good footballers came from that school back then.
And also, you when you did sign for us, I think Jim this is right. We played Wigan, didn't we, the year before in the cup, and I presumed you and Ray Woods played in that game. And
that's
of course,
right.
We did a typical Cov thing, and Jim will probably agree, is that we tend to sign the player who played really well against us, and I think Ray Woods had incredible 2 matches against us, and we signed him, but we didn't pick you up, which is interesting. We picked you up the following season. So when
there's a bit more to it than that.
Yeah, I bet there is. And it'd be great to hear about it, actually. So what was it like then, briefly, when you started your career at Wigan? Because obviously Wigan is a rugby league town, isn't it? It's big on rugby, and a lot of people would say Peter Atherton was built like a rugby player. Surely you must have played rugby, but you ended up playing football. How did that happen?
It was always football for me growing up. 2 of my close friends, one was rugby league player, one was rugby union at Orrell back then. They're Orrell, one of the bigger teams. So we also obviously had a diverse sporting background, but no, it was always football for myself from an early age. Although, like you said, they class Wigan as a rugby town because of the neighbours we've got: Liverpool, Everton, Man City, Man United, Bolton just up the road. There's a lot of competition for those fans. So although when both teams are doing well, they probably even out in terms of supporters, it is always classed as a rugby town. But I can assure you there's a lot of football and a lot of football fans in the town.
Brilliant. Jim, over to you.
Yeah, Peter, welcome to our podcast. I think maybe we start off by talking about that cup game in 1991, where you obviously came onto the Coventry City radar. It was the first game was at Highfield Road, and I think it was a very late equaliser for Wigan to get a 1-1 draw and take us back to Springfield Park.
That's right, yeah. Darren Patterson scored that late equaliser, yeah. So tough game, and then obviously got them back to Springfield Park. Unfortunately, lost that game 1-0. But yeah, from that game, I just pointed out earlier, as Claudio said, Ray Woods was spotted. But they also came for myself at that time. But after a lot of deliberation, and it was a difficult decision, Coventry was struggling at the bottom of Division 1 as it was back then, when it was 1, 2, 3, 4. And Wigan were floating around the playoffs. So it was a very tough decision, but I decided to stay till the end of the season. And then, thankfully, from my own perspective, early August, Terry Butcher came back in, and I became a Coventry City player.
So were you friendly with Ray Woods at the time?
Oh yeah. We had a relatively young team at Wigan, so it was a good group of players. A few of us had come through as apprentices. Ray had obviously signed for the club. I think he came from Tranmere, if memory serves me right. But yeah, we had a good group of players, and unfortunately that season we didn't make the playoffs. But as I said, Ray came to Coventry in the January and did well.
And what? So you came in the August. I remember your debut at QPR. I was there.
QPR, yeah.
And I think you impressed us all. Well, certainly the fans, anyway, from day one, as being a really solid defender who could play football.
The big thing for me with the move was moving from Wigan, where I've made debut at 17, was a regular at 18 through to 21. I didn't want to move somewhere where you'd be stuck in the reserves. Terry Butcher spoke well and said, obviously, give me a chance. So it was up to me then to prove myself. And thankfully I did that. But yeah, I remember the QPR game very well, winning 1-0. And bizarrely, their goal came from Roy Wegley, a cheeky little pushing me back, just took me under the ball. And I think they scored from the scramble in the box from that. So obviously spoke to Roy a few times when he came to Coventry a few years later. But yeah, it was a good start and thoroughly enjoyed the time at Coventry.
Yeah. Jim, did Peter Unlove make his debut as well that day at QPR?
I think he did, you know. Yeah, I think you're right.
Can't remember that one, yeah.
I think he was on the bench. I think he was.
Yeah, he did. He came on 40 minutes from time with Peter Billing.
He was a no-nonsense defender, wasn't he, Peter?
Oh, he was, yeah, good character.
Yeah. And one of the QPR substitutes was Gary Thompson, who came on for Les Ferdinand.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So you arrived at Coventry under Terry Butcher. He'd been there just over not even a year, actually. And he'd had a reasonable first season. His home form was excellent, but his away form was pretty atrocious. But he was shipping out the 87 team, the 1987 team. And I think just before you joined, Trevor Peake left to go to Luton. And you, I suppose, were his replacement.
Yeah, I think Brian Kilclan had left. Did he go to Oldham as well at a similar time? As you said, a few of those experienced players were leaving. So yeah, I came in as sort of Trevor Peake's replacement. Yeah, obviously there were big shoes to fill.
And did you feel that there were the ghosts of 87 still at the club?
No, obviously Mickey Jim was still there, and obviously you got Oggy and Brian Burrows, some good experienced players in there. But no, for me, I relished it. I loved the challenge of going into what was as I say, a Division 1 team there, and just trying to climb a trade at the top of the tree.
Yeah. And so have you got any sort of memories of that first season? Because it was a tough season, wasn't it?
Oh, it was, yeah, obviously curious end. But yeah, well, before I signed, Terry Butcher did say, he said if I signed and came to Coventry, he would get me in the England under-21s. And shortly after I signed, I did get that first call up, played alongside David James, Alan Shearer, just to mention a couple of names there. So that was obviously a great honour to represent my country, albeit at under-21 level. But Terry had mentioned, obviously, if I came and got in the team and stayed there, then that would obviously follow, which it did. Unfortunately, that Christmas, New Year's Eve, my father passed away, so that was a very difficult time over that Christmas. But then, like you say, carried on playing. Obviously, stayed in the team. Did particularly well in terms of performance levels, having made the step up from Division 3. But then that last day of the season away at Villa, and we just had to avoid defeat. And of course, I think it was barely 15 seconds into the game, and Big Cyril scored, and we went 1-0 down, and we're chasing the game a little bit. I remember walking off the pitch at the end, and the whispers and rumours had been flying around that Luton had beat Notts County, which would have meant we'd have been relegated. But it was the other way around. Notts County had won the game, and obviously they stayed up. And I remember the chairman coming running in with a bottle of champagne, absolutely buzzing and ecstatic that we'd stayed up. But until he came in, it was a very sombre dressing room, and we actually thought we'd been relegated.
Right. I know you're around training grounds now up until recently, Peter. Was there a huge difference even back then between coming up from Wigan and then playing into like what was the old First Division, then into the Premier League, like it is now? Was there a difference?
Of course, obviously the calibre of player and the detail and the quality of every team, it's difficult, but obviously it's something I'd aspired to do since I was a young boy. So, as I said, there was no fear. It was just a case of coming to Coventry and doing my best,
And obviously, we saw Terry Butcher leave the club early in the new year. I think that was after an FA Cup draw against Cambridge at Highfield Road. Was the writing on the wall for some time for Terry, do you think?
It's difficult to tell, obviously, even now. Well, even worse now, in terms of time frame for managers is difficult, and it's very much results based. So, as I say, at that time, I didn't play in the Cambridge game, if memory serves me right, because of my father passing away. But yeah, it's always difficult, and when you're in a team that's just avoided relegation, obviously, if you're slipping down the bottom end of the table again, then sometimes those decisions are made.
Yeah. And Don Howe took over as, caretaker manager, effectively. How did you find Don?
Tough character, yeah, demanding. I remember doing quite a lot of individual sessions with him after training, which was great for me in terms of an experienced and quality coach as Don was, to spend that time and to put that extra work in. And it certainly stood me in good stead throughout my career.
Is he renowned for being a tactical man, but he didn't have a great record, a success record as a number one manager, did he? He was more
right.
The coach style.
Yeah, I think he was more of a coach, as you said, than a manager. And back then, the difference is most managers were managers and they had a coach on the grass doing the day-to-day stuff.
Was Terry still playing then, Jim? Terry Butcher? Had he stopped playing?
I think his final game was about October time that year, and I think he got sent off playing the Villa in a Zenith Data Systems Cup game. I think his knee just gave up. I think he arrived from Rangers with a dodgy knee, and he didn't play that many games, even though the club had given him a playing contract as well as a manager's contract, and that became a bit of a sticking point when the club were obviously in financial trouble again. And I think Brian Richardson had come in as chairman by that time, and he was looking at the contracts. And that ended up in the High Court, if I remember rightly.
So he was getting two separate wages, in effect.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's a good deal, isn't it, Peter?
Yeah.
Did you play with Terry, Peter?
I don't think so. I can't remember that. I'm sure playing with somebody of his experience, I would have remembered, but I wouldn't like to say either way.
No, in his final game, that game against Aston Villa, he played alongside Andy Pearce.
Well, I was going to say there was Andy Pearce, Peter Billy, and myself. Obviously, Chris Greenacre was coming through. So no, I don't remember playing with him.
No. So that first season, you were playing alongside Andy Pearce in the main, were you?
Yeah, remember served me right. Yeah, it was bit of a classic big centre half who go and win everything, and I was more the covering and the speed around him. But yeah, he was a great lad, to be fair. And then obviously I followed him to Sheffield Wednesday as well after that.
Yes. He did something which you just wouldn't happen these days. You know, he stepped from non-league football into, you know, top flight football and looked good enough to, you know, he held his own.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
it's
very
something won't
unusual.
happen
Yeah.
these days, will it?
No, obviously Vardy's been the latest one, and he's took the accolades on doing a similar thing. But obviously he worked his way up the league, whereby Andy just did it in one jump, didn't he? Yeah.
Yeah.
Was Sean Flynn similar then, Jim, as well? Did he?
Yeah, Sean Flynn and Dave Boost.
Yeah. It was Hales Owen. I think was Flinney from Hales Owen, was it?
Yeah.
So obviously good from Coventry's perspective of scouting. They've picked up a few gems there.
They did. It wouldn't happen these days.
No.
So going back to that final day again, though, against Villa, were you marking Cyril?
I'm not sure on the cross. I don't think I was, but I'll say not just for this moment. No. But yeah, it was in football. The writing's on the wall, isn't it? Obviously, Cyril, a Coventry legend, and I think we kicked off as well. So how on earth we scored that? They scored that soon when we started with the ball was a bit obviously certainly not the start we'd wanted.
I think Stuart Robson lost the ball on the halfway line, didn't he? He got the ball rolled.
Is that right?
He lost it.
Did he?
I mean, yeah. You had one job, Peter, that day, was to stay with Cyril.
I'll blame Andy for that one.
Yeah. Because I don't suppose, you know, the irony of it, Cyril was given a free transfer by Coventry.
Yeah.
And we signed Robert Rosario to replace him. I think the fans never forgave the directors for doing that, really.
Of course, yeah. It's difficult when you've got such a cult hero.
Yeah. So moving on to the following season, then this is the start of the Premier League. Really, you know, exciting stuff. This is a new era.
Yeah.
And we had a new manager, Mr. Gould, arrived. What did you make of Bobby?
Larger than life, obviously. Everybody knows the character of the man, and but yeah, I got on well with him, and obviously we started to do better in terms of the team. But yeah, I enjoyed my time working with Bobby, to be honest.
Well, we had a fantastic start, didn't we?
Yeah.
The first leaders of the Premier League, Claudio.
Is that right?
We won our first 3 games, didn't we?
Well, yeah, we beat Middlesbrough at home, then we won at Tottenham, and then we won at Wimbledon, and 3 wins, 9 points, top of the league. Who would have believed it?
No, definitely not. Yeah. I'm glad you reminded me. I'm glad you reminded me because I didn't remember that, to be honest with you. But you think something like that should stick with me.
Yeah. With Bobby, Peter, what type of manager was he though? Because as fans, we just saw him as a heart on the sleeve. We're not even actually sure he gave you any tactics. It just felt like it was just go out there and get forward. Was there actually any structure with Bobby?
Of course, every manager has the structure and a way of playing and a style of playing. But obviously, with Bobby, as you say, his heart was on his sleeve, and he made sure every player was giving his all, and he did the same on the touchline. So, of course, you have tactics and you have a way of playing. But obviously, people like that sometimes get tagged and labelled, especially coming from Wimbledon and that style of player. But you know, like I said, we had some good footballers in the team back then.
Yeah, we had some wonderful players, actually.
It's a very, very good team. You know, when you look back on it, you know, Stuart Robson, Lee Hurst, Mickey Ginn, Kenny Sansom.
Kenny,
Peter and Love.
Yeah, like you said, Kenny, when I first came into the club, Kenny was excellent. He obviously unbelievable career, but really helped me in them early days at Coventry, so that was great. And then obviously followed with a number of other players. Obviously Mickey Jim was there, Oggy, Brian Burrs. Then you got the other lad, obviously Lee Hurst coming through, so you had that. And then obviously Peter and Love, you know, he was a breath of fresh air. He was amazing with the ball, and obviously he was only a a young man at the time, so he was still learning the game. But you know, he certainly got the crowd on the feet.
Yeah, but it was a fantastic start, and actually that the form seemed to continue for most of the season. I think we were still 7th in the table in early April.
Yeah,
And then we just fell apart in the last sort of half a dozen games and ended up 15th. There was that crazy game, the final game against Leeds. I don't know if you remember it, Claudio. We were 3-1 up with 5 minutes left and ended up giving away 2 goals and drawing 3-3.
The guy was at Southampton, scored, didn't he? Can't think of his name.
Danny Wallace.
Danny Wallace, yeah.
No, Rod Wallace.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And there was
been Rod at Leeds, yeah.
And there was loads of is that with the seats on the pitch and all sorts? It was a bit chaotic at the end, wasn't it? Pitch invasion and all sorts was going on.
Yeah.
It was scary times, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we'd have seen that. I think we'd have been sharpish getting off the pitch at that stage.
Yeah, there were some fantastic results that season. The ones that stick in my mind are the game at Blackburn just after Christmas, when if they beat us, they'd have gone top of the league, and we beat them 5-2. Do you remember that, Peter?
I don't know. So that's a long time ago now, so it's difficult to recall every game. But I do recall a number of good results, good performances. You know, we were always a dangerous team. And the other side of it, we're obviously good defensively as well, so we didn't concede that many goals. I think one season in my time at Coventry, I don't know if it was that season, I think we were second only to Arsenal in terms of goals conceded.
Yeah. We had a very strong defence. And you know, it was one of those where you could beat anybody on the day, and then lose to
poor frustrations.
For instance, we beat the Villa 3-0. We beat Liverpool 5-1.
Remember the Liverpool game? I wasn't sure if it was in that season, but that's one of the games that obviously stand out. I think we beat them 5-1 or something, but then I think we went to Anfield and lost 4-0, didn't we? So they sort of got their own on us. But yeah, that 5-1 performance against Liverpool, obviously at that stage, was an outstanding result.
Yeah.
I remember winning at Highbury as well. Was that season?
Yeah. Was that? No, it was the following season.
Was it the season before? Was it the first season? We won 2-1. We were absolutely backs against the wall, and we got peppered, but we came away from Highbury with a 2-1 win.
Is that the own goal? Is that the own goal match?
Yeah, Lee Dixon.
Yeah. Lee Dixon when he chipped it over the top. Yeah.
Yes.
You when that happens, Peter, do you actually have a laugh? You know, it's.
You just believe it, especially to England internationals. Obviously, Arsenal, one of the top teams. You certainly don't expect it, but yeah, you can't help but smile and obviously look favoured us at that particular moment.
It's a classic goal.
It was, yeah.
And of course, one of the highlights of that season was after the good start, things had slipped a bit, and Bobby Gould went out and got Mick Quinn on loan. What do you remember of Mick arriving?
Well, Mick used to play for Wigan as well, but I missed him then. I didn't play. Obviously, he's a bit older than me, but you knew the character he was. Obviously, lively, great around the dressing room, and a goal machine. So he came in and he was a barrel of fun, but worked hard and was obviously desperate to win.
Yeah.
He was fond memories of Mick. Yeah.
Yeah. But you used the word barrel. He was a bit of a barrel, wasn't he?
Yeah, he got a little bit of a stick for that, didn't he? But he certainly knew where the goal was.
Yeah, he really excited the fans, didn't he, Claudio?
Oh, well, straight away, I think because of the shape of him and the size of him, he just became a fan's favourite. And he also he loved the banter, didn't he? As they call it.
Yeah.
All the you've ate all the pies and all that, and that's kind of thing. He gave it.
He literally fed off it, didn't he? You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and he had a Premier League record. I think still stands now, doesn't it? I think one of them. He was gleefully tenureless one night. One of his records still stands apparently.
Oh, well.
even though Haaland beat the other one or something.
10 goals in his first 6 games or something.
Yeah, I think he's still got that.
Really? Wow.
It's a phenomenal start.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, he really livened that season up, and I think we should have finished higher. I really do. We just slipped away.
Fell away
towards the end. But it was still a good season, I think. Obviously compared to the previous one.
The season before, yeah.
Yeah. So I think the other person who arrived that season was Phil Babb, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think Phil came in as a striker initially, didn't he, from Bradford?
Yeah.
And then obviously reverted to centre back alongside myself, and we struck up a good partnership. And
yes,
it was good times, yeah.
And he obviously won a place in the Republic of Ireland squad for the World Cup.
And then did ever so well in the World Cup, yeah. And then obviously took off.
He did. I think his transfer value doubled just on his World Cup performances in the USA.
Yeah, Ireland just had a good one. He was a part of that, and as you say, it sort of did him no harm. And then obviously a great move to Liverpool.
Yeah. Would you say he's one of the best defenders you've played with?
Definitely, yeah. He had pace, and he was very calm, to be fair. So a big thing when you're obviously defending is to keep that composure. And Phil was like that. I don't know if it's like you say, because he sort of played up front and he didn't really start off in that position, but he certainly slotted in well. And like you said, we had a good relationship and a good partnership together.
You've mentioned all those defenders that you played with, Peter. I mean, nowadays, of course, you've got 18 players in the squad, and it's quite easy to keep everybody happy because you can just take a couple of you off and give a couple of lads a game. What was it like back then? Because if you had about 4 or 5 central defenders, we could only play 2.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. In terms of subs, last I did there was 1 sub, and then it changed to 2, and that was a big change. So you just expected to play back then. I think players probably miss out on that these days, although people say the game's faster and more difficult in terms of distances run. But I think back then players didn't want to be subbed. They didn't want to go off. You wanted to play every minute of every game.
So it was 2 subs when you first joined us, wasn't it? So if you didn't play, would you be playing in the reserves then during the week?
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely. Yeah, I remember. I actually did. I fractured my cheekbone. I think it was the game Bobby Gould resigned away at QPR, and I then played with the mat, trained with the mask. I had the mask after Gaza just to protect my face in the games. Bizarrely, I played in a reserve game up at Sheffield Wednesday to see how I would cope with that mask. But yeah, you certainly back then you were more competitive playing in the reserves, and that was your opportunity to show good attitude, keep your match fitness up, and hopefully show the manager that you were ready to play.
It's a shame that reserve teams have been disbanded, really, isn't it? Because
the
Central League was a really strong league.
Going back to my time before I came to Coventry, I started off at Wigan, and I remember still being at school at 16, playing away at Newcastle at St James's Park, and I think there was 2,000-3,000 players in the fans, and I remember seeing like one of the players. I was only sub back then, as I say, I was only 16, but seeing this player absolutely running amok and so skillful, and I believe it was Gaza back then. And in another game I was playing, came on a sub against Liverpool at Anfield. To walk out on that stadium at any level is amazing. And I was playing against Steve McMahon, who was obviously playing for England at that time.
Wow.
So in terms of character building and giving you opportunities and whetting your appetite, as you said, that Central League and playing against and with experienced players was a big part of learning the game.
Yeah.
That would have been amazing because, Wigan joined the Football League in, I think, 78, Jim, was it?
78 they got in, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, so that's like in the early stages of Wigan being in the Football League, and all of a sudden you've got Central League matches against Liverpool, Everton, whoever else is in that northern section. Yeah. That would be amazing, actually. It really would.
Yeah, and playing on the stadiums, you don't really get that anymore, but it gave you that sort of that learning curve, of going out in a big stadium like that, albeit it weren't full when I went on at Anfield, like it would have been on a Saturday in the league game. But as you say, it just gave you a great experience, and like you said, made you wanted to go out and do it for real in a first team.
Because I think nowadays, compared to then, Jim, I think when players were in the reserves, you got a game, you played because you had to play and you wanted to prove yourself to get back in the first team. I think now, I don't know what you think, Peter, do players see it as like I don't know, I've been dropped, you've kicked me out, you've put me in with the under-23s because you've got a squad of 18?
I think sometimes it can be looked on negatively. Yeah, it's certainly the case whereby, like I say, back then it was just the norm. You knew if you weren't playing, and it was a competitive league, as you said there with the Central League. You had some good games in there on the stadium, some good pitches, and you wanted to play. And like you say, as you said before, with only being 2 subs, places on the bench were of a premium, let alone in the starting 11. So you had to do all you could to get yourself back in that starting 11.
So how ready then are players now when they're on the bench? We've got a couple at our club, the central defenders, who basically got Bobby Thomas and Liam Kitchen are pretty much our starters. The two of the lads come in when they're injured, basically, don't they now, Jim? So what happens if you go 15 matches, you don't get a kick? How are you expected to just get on the pitch and do it? That must be so hard for that player.
I agree, and particularly if you, like you say, you've not had those competitive reserve games as I did back in the day. And I think it's always something I've looked at, and I've looked at it as a player and a coach, but particularly as a coach, like you said, that sharpness, that in-game decision making at that speed, you can't replicate. You can work hard in training, you can set things up, but actually replicating that in a game, you can't do that sort of thing. But I think for me, remembering back in my playing career, you started the season and it took you 4 or 5 games to get up to full speed, from having pre-season games and getting up and running. So as you said there, if players are not playing for a number of weeks, it's difficult to build up that match tempo and that fitness base.
So just one last point on that then. Was there ever a time when, not necessarily you or another player's on the bench, 5 minutes to go, pissing down with rain, and the gaffer says, "You're going on"? Has it been anybody who's sort of gone, "No, I don't fancy going on now"?
Not that I can remember, no. That's genuine as well. It certainly wouldn't have done that myself because obviously you're there for the team. Yeah. But I genuinely, you've read things in the papers about other teams, but certainly never noticed it myself at any of the clubs I was at.
Right.
Yeah. Just going on about the point about players coming back from injury though, and needing reserve team games. I can remember, players at Coventry who've had serious injuries, maybe broken legs and whatever. And when they're ready to come back, they've been playing in the reserves, and the attendances they get when, for instance, George Curtis came back from his broken leg, or Bill Glazier came back from his broken leg, the crowd would double. There'd be several thousand there just to see the hero returning, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you just don't get that anymore. And it's sometimes you feel it's almost frowned upon to play in the reserves or the 23s, whichever way you want to look at it. But
I did the number of first team squad players who played for our under 23s in the last few years, you could count them on one hand.
Right.
They don't use them. They'd rather promote a 16-year-old from the academy up rather than take a first teamer down.
Yeah, but as I said before, I think it's a loss to those young kids as well, because I think having the opportunity to play with, for example, the George Curtis there returning from injury, for the rest of that team to actually, it's all right training with him, but just being around him on the pitch as a learning curve, it's invaluable, and like you say, we've not got that. And I know recently they've had 1 or 2 experienced players dropping down as player coaches for these 23 teams. I think Man United did it. I think Liverpool were doing it, and a number of other teams. So they were sort of almost going back to that, but it's not the same as, like you say, having that regular experience playing different players as well, just dropping in. And it's great experience for those apprentices and those young pros as well.
Yeah. So moving on into the 93-4 season, and another good start to the season, but then a bombshell at Loftus Road. Do you remember much about the
I'm sorry,
game
that
on
was it. Yeah,
Loftus Road?
that's the game I broke my cheekbone, isn't it? Is that right? When Bobby resigned.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, after the game, I played the game. I carried on playing. Didn't realise at that time, and until we got back to Harfield Road, and then I went to the hospital where I realised I'd fractured it. So finished the game a bit dazed, obviously, in terms of the head injury after the game. But yeah, it was obviously a shock and bewilderment, really. Obviously, once that happened after the game.
Was it in the toilet, on the pitch, or on the coach? We never seem to get down to where did he actually resign.
I thought it was in the changing room, but again,
Was
like I say, I fractured my cheekbone, so I might be mistaken. But as far as I'm aware, I'm sure like the whispers were going around the dressing room when we were in there.
Right. And do you get a feeling as a player what it was all about?
No, not really. I don't think you ever sort of get the true insight of that. Obviously, it happens quickly. Sometimes it's obviously not the manager's decision. Sometimes managers make the decision themselves. So, as players, quite especially then. Obviously, now you've got social media and a lot of other things going on, and sometimes things are out in the press before they've actually happened. But in terms of that, it was certainly a shock to myself.
Bobby always said that the club were going to sell Peter and Love, and that he sort of preempted that. He didn't like that decision and put his resignation in. But I do wonder, because Brian Richardson, who previously been a director under Peter Robbins' chairmanship, Brian had taken over as chairman, and I think there was a fair bit of friction between the two of them, which may have precipitated the resignation. But it was a shock to the fans. God, it was.
Yeah, because you said from my time there, each season we'd been improving, and
and that period, as we said, the previous season, it was quite an exciting season, and the 93-4 season had started well. They'd been, I think, been in the top 3 or 4 at the start, after half a dozen games. I do remember just before Bobby resigned, we played at Wickham in a League Cup game. I don't know if you remember that. It was a 2-legged game against Wickham. We beat them 3-0 at home, and suddenly we were 4-0 down at Wickham, looking like we were going out. Do you remember that game?
I don't know. Did I play in that? Have you got the team?
I've got the team.
He didn't lose his man again, did he, Jim?
Yeah.
4 times.
You did play. Alongside, looks like David Rennie was in centre defence.
David Rennie, yeah. Dave used to mix it into, sometimes he was centre back, sometimes he was centre mid.
Martin O'Neill was the manager of Wickham. And he'd only just come into the league. And
of course,
we were in the top 6 in the Premier League, and they did us good and proper. Although we got 2 very late goals in extra time through Steve Morgan and Phil Babb.
Just saved our scoring,
So we won 5-4 in aggregate.
Yeah, apologies there. No, don't. Normally you remember those kind of games because obviously
I think it's completely blocked out all the defeats, Jim, by the sound.
Yeah. The main thing that stays with me, I think it was playing Swindon away. I think I gave 2 penalties away in one game. That sort of stayed with me. I think it was Jan Åge Fjoltoff, I think it was.
Oh goodness, yes. One of Swindon's rare wins in the Premier League.
Yeah,
I'm sure that was on Sky as well. I think it was on Sky, that game.
Thanks for that, Claudio.
Yeah.
There's footage out there.
Yeah, there is, definitely.
I'll try and delete it,
Yes.
So sorry, no, I have no recollection of the Wickham game, unfortunately for myself.
So Phil Neal, who was the number 2 to Bobby, he stepped into the manager's chair. Was it a lot different to Bobby?
No, obviously Phil had been working with Bobby and was coaching and working on the grass with and alongside Bobby, so it was pretty continuous, really. You know, it's different to when a new man comes into the club, but when it's promoted from within, it's better continuity from a player perspective because you're working with somebody that you already know.
Yeah. I don't know what you think, Claudio, but after Bobby left, I felt that we started signing lesser quality players. We signed. There's no disrespect to the players concerned, but people like Ali Pickering and who else am I thinking of? I can't think of any others actually. Paul Williams.
Was Lee
We
Jenkinson?
signed two. Lee was there when I signed, so Lee was earlier on, was he?
Yeah.
He likes
left and went to St Johnson.
I just felt that the quality of the side it diminished it somewhat.
But I also think Bobby leaving the way he did I don't know what you think. Does that can that deflate the squad as well, Peter? Because it was a bit dramatic, wasn't it? That the way he left.
It can have that effect. Yeah, sudden change, especially like you say when it's unexpected. Obviously, if you're struggling and you're at the bottom of the table, then sometimes you can get a feel for that, and you're all under pressure to perform and win games. But certainly when you're not in that particular situation, then it does come as a surprise. And it's not. Go on. Sorry.
No. It does sound like the consistent part of the defence was you, I think, whereas you seem to have played with a lot of different players as well in that back four, which can't help either because you've had a lot of central defensive partners, didn't you? But the consistent one was you, basically. So that's the odd.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, but like you say, I did play with a number of different players over the years. Deputed at right back a few times when Brian Booz wasn't playing. So generally was centre back in the majority of the career there. So, but again, your main focus was always trying to keep your own place in the team first and foremost. And whatever the team is around you, you do your best.
Mm.
So the season, it wasn't a bad season, and Phil got us to 11th place, final position, with a really good run at the end of the season. I think we were unbeaten in 7 games at the end of the season. Won at Ipswich, beat Spurs at home, a draw with Sheffield Wednesday, a draw at Everton, beat Blackburn, who that was the night that we ended Blackburn's title hopes.
Yeah.
All right, yeah.
Julian Derby scoring twice.
Did you say Julian Derby scored twice?
We won at Chelsea. They were in the cup final a few days later.
Yeah.
And then final day we drew 0-0 at Old Trafford.
I remember they'd already won the league. They'd already won the league, and then we had to parade them out.
Yeah.
I remember doing that. I remember Eric Cantona in the game. I think he was a bit of a naughty tackle on Phil Babb, if I remember rightly. And you think they'd already sort of won the league, but a bit odd before a game when you paraded your opponents out.
Peter, how do you think you'd cope nowadays with the way the games are refereed? Because I mean, you like to get stuck in, didn't you? Like most offenders, it must be so much harder for the lads now to actually compete sometimes.
Yeah, it's certainly. Well, it's almost non-contact at times, isn't it? And I know there's a reason behind it, but for me, the game's lost something. I mean, you just look back to the classics where there was your Gerard Keane and you had them tough tackling midfield players, you had centre-back challenges and tough centre-forwards. You always had those contests throughout the pitch and, the physicality. And like you say, you don't want to see people get injured and nasty challenges, but certainly you wanted that competitive edge. And it got the crowd going as well. And I think, as a spectacle, and I'm not a fan now with all the rolling around and people faking injury. Particularly when not just VAR, but just the cameras, and you can clearly see there's no contact, and yet they're deliberately trying to get opponents, fellow professionals, yellow cards or red cards. So it's disappointing when the game falls into that sort of manner.
So do you think ex-players should maybe get more involved in that side of the game? The PGMOL, is it, whatever it's called?
Yeah, I certainly think that would be a I think I would sort of support in terms of, especially VAR as well, in terms of alongside a referee. So you've got the sort of game knowledge as well as the rules, because there is always opinions in football, but there's things that players know that go on that referee's probably not aware of.
It's quite funny because Carl Baker is doing it, and when I spoke to him recently, he says the only problem is there's about 20 teams I can't referee because of who he's playing for, or the rivals, and whether it's Derby.
Yeah, that could be a problem.
Is that the rule then? Is it?
Well, yeah, because if he's like Liverpool, isn't he? So he can't do Everton, and he obviously played for Coventry. So there's certain teams he can't referee.
Right.
It's all and also he said he had to delete everything from his Twitter account because they will. Because if anybody sees something where you may have badmouthed another team, another a bunch of houses, whatever, and then you're refereeing Newcastle the next week, that will get flagged up immediately, saying, "Oh, he's got a vendetta against us already."
Right,
it's an absolute nightmare. So don't go on socials, Pete, if you're going to do that.
No.
So is he going to be refereeing at sort of non-league level next season?
I'm not sure. I think that's what the idea is. Is trying to go through it all and be an actual referee, which I think is great, actually.
It is
sort of fast track. You'd like to think that because they've always got knowledge of the game already, haven't they? And it's just fine tuning on the finer details of the rules.
And of course, you recently being assistant manager, what does the fourth official actually do? Do they?
I think they sort of just get abused by both benches for all the referees' mistakes. Basically, it's certainly not a job I would advise anybody to take. I think they're in such a difficult position because the referee makes a decision on the pitch and he's the closest to whichever bench. Sometimes both benches don't agree, and it's just a free for all almost. So it's a difficult job because if it is a mistake, it's not even his mistake, but he's getting the stick for it.
Is he in a position where he can tell the referee though that he's seen something? Can he do that or not?
That's another inconsistency because we've had times where we've sort of highlighted something and saying you can see the same as us. Surely you've seen it, and sometimes I think it's particular whether it's just referees or whatever that they'll say no, he doesn't want us interfering with that, or whether they just don't get involved. We've had all kinds of aspects of that in terms of from a fourth official, because one week you would they would be involved, and the next week you'd say something and say no, I can't get involved. So there is an inconsistency for me, in my opinion.
Oh, interesting that.
What was your disciplinary record like, Peter?
Quite good, I think. Have you got some figures for me? Yeah, I
got
sent off twice. I only
No.
got sent off twice, so and both of those were for double yellow cards. So I remember at Sheffield Wednesday, very last game of the season away at Atherton, I got sent off near the end of the game, which meant I did all pre-season the following year, knowing I couldn't play the first game of the season because the suspension carried over. So that was a tough lesson. And then the other one, I got sent off for Bradford away at Rotherham.
This is slightly off Coventry City now, but were you at Sheffield Wednesday when you got relegated on the last game of the season where it was like a ridiculous amount of results had to go against Sheffield Wednesday? Was you playing then for them?
No, I was there when we got relegated in 2000, but we were already relegated before the end of it. We got relegated away at Arsenal. So that must have been just before me then, because I think were they like a Division 2 team when they win the League Cup? 91 was it, or did they beat United?
Yeah, I think they were.
I think it was a day when they had to have a sequence of results, which everybody said that's never going to happen, and every result went against them. And I'm sure Wednesday lost to Forest or something like that.
Right.
And
no, when I was there 6 years, and it was 2000, my last season there, we got relegated.
Oh, right.
Jim Lucas,
I'm just looking it up actually.
Because obviously they had the double cup final the year before I went in '93.
While he's looking, I'll ask you, Pete. What was your as growing up then? Who was your hero as a young lad growing up? I mean, did you support Wigan, by the way, or did you support somebody else?
No, it's a funny question. I mean, yeah, Wigan was my hometown, so you're a fan of that, but you're always playing. So I never sort of really got to many games to watch them. Growing up, we never had a family car. My dad was a bricklayer. He sort of worked, so you sort of got along on buses or you were walking to places. So in terms of watching Wigan, I didn't take in that many games. As I said back then, you used to play Saturday and Sunday, so you generally playing yourself. Back then, like obviously Liverpool were one of the top teams, likes of Kenny Dalglish, Alan Hansen, Mark Lawrence, and centre backs, Glenn Hoddle. In terms of just his passing and his ability in a game, they were sort of players you sort of like. Liam Brady at Arsenal. You know, there was a lot of quality players around back then.
And of course, you were sort of at the start of all the foreign players coming over as well, weren't you?
Was yeah.
What was that like? Did you? I'm trying to work. Did you play with Carboni and Di Canio?
I did, yeah.
You did. You were with Di Canio as well.
Yeah, I played in the game when he pushed the referee over. Yeah, I
Oh,
was in
did
that
you?
game.
What did you think to that at the time? I shouldn't laugh. Sorry.
Well, yeah, it was. I mean, you didn't sort of notice it at first, and then obviously when it happened, then it was just, you feared the worst from what had happened. So it was, yeah, an odd scenario, one obviously had not seen before or seen since, thankfully. So obviously, Paolo served his punishment. I remember it's like the Sky cameras chasing him around Rome. I think he disappeared to Rome for a few weeks, and I remember Sky cameramen trying to chase him through the streets on mopeds and things.
He was a character, wasn't he? Good
But yeah,
player.
I was with. Yeah, I was with Benito. Benito first came over, Carbonian, didn't speak any English. He was a good player, and he came to Bradford as well when I was at Bradford.
Of course he did.
Yeah.
So why did you leave Coventry to go to Sheffield Wednesday?
Basically, my contract was up. So as my contract was coming to the end, when I signed from Wigan, I signed a 3-year contract. Towards the end of the season, just basically near the end, the club offered me a contract. Didn't feel it was worthy of it. I'd been literally an ever present, and the club never really chased and tried to negotiate much else. So once my contract expired, then Sheffield Wednesday came in. There was no, I didn't know of their interest prior to that. It was just something that came about. And back then, obviously, it was pre-Bosman. So like my move to Coventry, that again was, went to the panel, and it was, I'm lost for words now. Tribunal. It used to go to the tribunal, and they used to put a price on what the value was for the sale. So just the contract expired, and we didn't obviously come to an agreement on a renewal.
Was Sheffield the only choice, or was there other clubs coming?
Yeah, that time that was when they came in pretty much straight away, and obviously looking at the squad they had then and the players they had there, it was it was going to be a good chance to go up there and play with that calibre of player.
I'm trying to think, who was the manager at Sheffield Wednesday then?
Trevor Francis.
I was going to say Trevor Francis. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, so Terry Butcher signed me for Coventry, and then Trevor Francis signed me for Sheffield Wednesday.
Yeah.
And it was, as you say, it was a pretty impressive squad, wasn't it? You had players like Mark Bright and I'm thinking David Hurst,
Chris Wood, David Hurst, John Sheridan, Des Walker.
Was Des Walker there?
Yeah, Des was there. Yeah,
Was Chris
Waddle played alongside Des. Chris Waddle was there. Well, that's when they signed me, because earlier, obviously, at Coventry, my main playing position had been centre back, although I had played right back as well. They actually signed me as right back to replace Roland Nielsen, who was allegedly going back to Sweden. So they signed me to play behind Chris Waddle as a right back, and then lo and behold, Roland Nielsen came and signed for Cov.
Yeah, what a tough act to follow, though, Roland Nielsen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so really, Coventry didn't make any great strides to keep you.
Didn't feel like that, no.
No. And yet, they'd sold Andy Pearce to Sheffield just before that, hadn't they?
Yeah, Andy had gone. So obviously I joined back up with him, but I had no intention of leaving. As I say, it was just the contract ran out, and
and then just after the World Cup, Phil Babb left as well. So we lost 3 central defenders in 3 months, basically.
Yeah.
Wow. No wonder 94-5 was a bad season, Claudio.
We went from 6 defenders to none.
Yes.
Yeah. Very attacking formation.
Did you have an agent back in the day, Peter? Because I know.
I didn't know. When I came to Coventry, a couple of agents, after I'd signed for Coventry, a couple of agents approached me in that first season, a couple of high-profile ones. But no, I just stayed with the PFA. I always used Brendan Batson was generally the guy from the PFA who sort of negotiated and managed. But actually, when I signed for Coventry, it was my brother who came with me. I didn't have an agent. It was just my brother who came along and helped me.
A bit like Anelka. In fact, Anelka has his brother and everybody else, isn't he? It's a big entourage from what I gather.
Well, yeah.
So nowadays, then, obviously moving on, because with agents well and truly involved, what's it like then on the transfer deadline day? Because that must be hell.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I would have been assistant. I've not actually been the manager to lead that, so it's always a worry that players can leave late on. Obviously, one move can trigger a chain of events, and then everybody starts chasing down the line to replace players they've lost. But yeah, it doesn't seem to be as frantic as it was. You don't get the same panic. People seem to be a bit more control these days. But as a player, I was never affected by that. Nobody ever came to buy me on transfer deadline, and I was happy at the clubs. I've always, I've loved the clubs that I've played for.
Mm. And you must have come up against Coventry playing for Wednesday a few times.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, a couple of games. One, I'd been struggling with a knee injury. It was a bit of a bizarre injury. It sort of was coming and going a little bit. And I remember starting a game against Coventry at Hillsborough, and it just wasn't right, my knee. So I went off pretty early in the game. But the other classic was, I don't know if that was on Sky as well. I don't know if Claudio knows. He seems to remember all the bad ones. I think Dion scored a hat-trick, and we won 4-3 Sheffield Wednesday.
Yeah. I
was marking Dion on a couple of those corners when he scored a near post header. I certainly remember one of those.
Well, we spoke about Dion last week, saying that he was very good at that, coming away near post, flick-ons, far post. Very good at that.
Yeah, he sort of just arched his back and just manoeuvred. He just sort of pinned you at a distance and leant away from you. And the delivery, I think it might have been Paul Telfer at the time, was excellent delivery. So if they got it right, it was difficult to defend. But I played against Dion when Dion was at Cambridge and I was at Wigan. We'd had a few tussles over the years. But we saw him the other week. He was doing one of his TV programs and he was at the Bolton Hotel at the stadium. So he's close friends with Matt Gilks, who was our goalkeeping coach. So he came over and we had 10 minutes.
So I believe you captain at Sheffield Wednesday, weren't you?
I was, yeah, 5 years, yeah.
Played Premier League football with us. So what does leadership on the pitch mean then? Is it back then? Is it any different to captains now? Because it feels like nowadays the captains get handed out willy-nilly. We've had 4 or probably 6 captains this season, haven't we, Jim? It's weird.
Yeah.
Right.
Back in the day, you were the captain, weren't you? And you got injured.
Yeah, I think it was certainly different then, albeit I think you alluded to it earlier on about saying about the teams chop and change that many times as well, that captains have to change because, obviously you got the likes of Van Dijk who don't miss many games, but captains as well, they're not guaranteed a place, so it can be a sort of changing world in terms of starting 11. But certainly back then there was more leadership on the pitch, and you certainly had your quieter captains back then. But in general, you were there to motivate and help the team as best you could.
So you going back to Coventry, what are your fondest memories of being at the club?
Fond memories of Wrighton. It was a lovely training ground. Obviously, the staff there, the players, the people. It was a good club. Having left home at 21, straight from day one, I felt, albeit I think got an elbow on day one from Rob Rosario. I think he burst me lip, but that was a nice introduction. But no, the people were very friendly. I felt at home at the club, and like you said before, I played majority of my time in the first team. So
You
it
did,
was the right move for me. As I said, there was no reason for leaving other than my contract expired. So met a lot of good people in the team, the staff around it, and enjoyed my time at Coventry a lot. Yeah.
And were you aware of what was going on behind the scenes? The club's financial issues, or
Not really, no. It was different back then, weren't it? Again, like I said, with no social media and the likes, certain things might break in the press, but it was sort of, you met chairman and you knew who they were, but you didn't know them like they do today, where they're doing interviews after games and they're in the press as much as the managers. Generally it was the manager who was the face of the club, and the directors and the chairman were in the background. Although you knew them, you weren't close to them, if you will.
And who would you say was the best Coventry City player you played with? Because you played with some really good ones, Peter.
Yeah, there was a few. It's difficult. Yeah,
Kevin Gallagher.
Kev was good in terms of obviously fans' favourite, but the energy, his pace, obviously his goal scoring. Peter, a young lad, obviously came through, was a breath of fresh air. Could do anything with the ball. Stuart Robson was a good influence in terms of. Sometimes he'd stay over to our house before games in match prep rather than being in a hotel. And I said in my initial period, Kenny Sanson, he was good to me as well. So yeah, there was too many to just name one, but hopefully I've named a few. They're good characters. Mick Arthur came, Les Sealer, Mickey Quinn we spoke about before. Yeah. As I said, coming into the team at 21, 22, being around those characters, but also, as much as you were laughing about the stick Mickey Quinn got, the professionalism, the practice they used to do, the way they were, they enjoyed life, but they certainly were winners as footballers.
Yeah. And what about opponents? Who would you say were your most difficult opponents?
Again, people ask me this quite a lot, and you were playing against top class strikers week in, week out. It was always a challenge, but you could never go into a game fearing anybody, because then you'd be lost, so you just had to take on the challenge and say, today I'm going to be better than you. But certainly back then, and through the 90s in particular, sort of Man United with the team, and Mark Hughes was always a handful, was always tough, gave as good as he got, and you didn't get much room off him in terms of when you were having that physical battle as Claudio spoke about before. You knew he was there for 90 minutes, and the way he played, he would hold it up, and then you had Kanchelskis, Giggs, Lee Sharp running off him, Brian McClure sort of playing in that pocket. So he was integral in the way they played as well, and obviously could score spectacular goals as well.
Yeah.
Well, then okay, then put it another way, any naughty strikers, any players you'd come against and you think, at some point you're going to stop pinching me at corners?
Yeah, I think everybody had. There was plenty of them knocking around, but like I say, back then the game was more physical. It was part and parcel. You had that sort of mental challenge with each other, who could win that mental battle. So most games you had that competition, direct opponent who was going to win the battle of the wills. It was more part of the game back then, weren't it?
Yeah, I think Ian Wright would be top of my list if I was playing.
Yeah, well, I remember playing, and he'd constantly be talking to you, constantly trying to get you to switch off, and his best policy was just to ignore him and do what you can. But yeah, he wasn't as nasty. He was more of a character and tried to sort of just almost befriend you to then catch you out.
Yeah. So, and what about like referees as well, then, Peter? Because obviously it's so refereed so differently now. What was it like then with the referees? The between players.
You could speak to them a lot more. There was certainly more leeway. I don't think the game's learned and benefited in terms of respect for officials and the way sometimes players do react, and I think that's been apparent in the game from when I was playing. So it certainly is better when there's not as much chasing the referee everywhere. But yeah, back then you could certainly speak to him, particularly as captain. You could have a word, and it was more. I think there was more common sense then, whereby now I think referees are aware they're being assessed and they're watched from the stand and they're being judged, obviously from their own assessor, but obviously Sky TV and everything's looked over meticulously. So I think it is a difficult job. and they only get one look at it, whereby we'll see things on TV, and by the time you've seen 3 or 4 replays, you might have changed your mind completely.
Was there any favourite grounds you used to go like to play? I mean, obviously, apart from Highfield Road, which is the mecca of football, it was.
Yeah,
Back
of course, yeah.
was there? It must have been an eye opener from Springfield, wasn't it, Wigan?
Springfield Park, yeah, averaging
Then to Highfield
1,800,
Road.
2,000, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, brilliant. Like a lot of happy times there. Like you say, it was good, and we had some great results there over the years, some good performances, and when it was rocking, it was great to be a part of that. But in terms of away, your classics really, your Anfield, Newcastle, obviously electrifying atmosphere. Sunderland up there, they're always very vocal. Your Leeds, Man United, Arsenal. When them places are full and the atmosphere can be electric.
Yeah, and also because obviously when you're at Wigan, you had a chance of doing a bit of giant killing. So what was it like when you're at Coventry then, and you get drawn against a team from the lower divisions? What's the pressure like then? Is it completely different?
Of course it is, yeah. You're always wary of that banana skin. It just, the opposition tend to... Yeah, exactly. And the opposition quite often raise their game because, as you say, it's a great opportunity to them. Pitch themselves to get, like myself at Wigan when I did it against Coventry, as you said. It's an opportunity to play against some big clubs, but quality players as well. And it's that challenge. And, you've got to make sure you're on your mettle. And, from a first division team or Premier League team, it's important you stay switched on because that's proven over the years. There's always danger. Obviously Sutton and it with Coventry before my time. It can be difficult days. No, sorry.
I think Jim's like any other Cov fan. When the draw to the FA Cup was made, the third round, we used to think, please just let it be somebody in the top flight at home.
Yeah.
And nobody, a non-league or Div 2 or Div 3 back then. It was we used to dread it.
Yeah, it can be difficult with the pitches and that, but yeah, it's a challenge. But obviously, it's one you have to take on the chin.
Well, you played at Scarborough when we lost 3-0 to Scarborough, didn't you?
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah. I've been a part of a couple of them. Yeah, they're not nice.
No, that was a bad night. I think we were second in the Premier League at the time, and Scarborough were 4th division. Yeah, we've had a few bad cup results.
Yeah.
Well, that's tremendous talking to you, Peter. It really is interesting to hear about your time at Coventry and obviously a very successful time at Sheffield Wednesday. And you had a season. Was it just one season at Bradford?
No, 5 seasons at Bradford.
5?
Yeah.
Okay.
You
were in the Premier League with them, weren't you?
Yeah, so Sheffield Wednesday got relegated. Bradford stayed up. So the move came about for me just wanting to stay in the Premier League as long as I could. But then Bradford started to have the financial scenarios, and I ended up on loan at Birmingham for the remainder of that season. We lost in the playoff semi-final away at Preston. And I actually did my knee that day, and that sort of affected my career over the following season. And I was out for, I think it was 12 months with that. So that was a tough time.
So did you play at Highfield Road in 2001 when we both got relegated then? Was you there then at Bradford?
Well, I was on loan at Birmingham.
At the time?
Yeah, so I would have been a Bradford player, but I was actually on loan. Yeah, I went on loan. Well, it was Trevor Francis was the manager at Birmingham. Obviously, he'd signed me at Sheffield Wednesday, so he took me on loan for the remainder of the season.
It was like going to a funeral, that game. It was terrible because both clubs had been relegated. Just an awful game, wasn't it, Jim? Terrible.
It was, yeah.
Not great.
Actually, I missed that one.
We need to end it on something more cheery than that, surely.
But it was a pleasure the other week to meet. Obviously, I met Jim at the stadium. It's the first time I'd been back to the new stadium, watching the Burnley game. Unfortunately, didn't get the result, but it was great catching up with some of former colleagues. Kenny Sanson was there, obviously Kevin Gallagher, David Smith, Lee Hurst, Mickey J. Noggy. So it was really good to see those faces.
Yeah, there were a lot from your era, weren't there?
Yeah, it was an amazing day. And even lads who came after me to Coventry who I played against, Paul Williams was there, and Marcus Hall was there, who I he was coming through as a young lad at that time.
Yeah.
So it was brilliant to be going back and to see that Legends Day is
Yeah.
very special, and it was brilliant.
Yeah.
You would have put that ball into the stand, wouldn't you, for that goal?
Yeah, it wasn't easy. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. I think we're trying to end on a good point here, but I think something similar happened to me and Oggy. I think it was away at Newcastle. So yeah, I can't be too harsh on that because I've got.
And also, I'll just mention this because the season tickets sold 22,000 already for next season. Looks like it's going to be another record.
Yeah,
So in the last 10 years, we've gained 18,000 fans or something. It's extraordinary.
wow.
It is extraordinary. And I know your ex, and actually, if you think about it, your two ex clubs, Sheffield Wednesday, somehow still get the big crowds. And I have to say, I feel for their fans at the minute, big time. But also, Bradford City, their gates are incredible, aren't they? For the division they're in, it's absolutely
the
amazing.
core support. It is, yeah. Like you say, Coventry obviously not been back in the Prem since sort of I left, and then after my time, but back then Sheffield Wednesday as well fell away. Bradford fell away, so you want those clubs that you played for to do well, and it's nice to see Covent watch the playoff game, and they were so close against Sunderland. You were sort of hoping to get it over the line. It was cruel, wasn't it? But that's football. That's football, yeah. And then Sunderland, they did it again in the final, sort of thing, didn't they? So it just seemed like it was their year.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's brilliant. It's brilliant to look back because, like you said, Harfield Road and my time at Coventry was brilliant. It was such a good time that you're looking back and all the disappointment and the troubles the club have had, and it's nice to go to that stadium, seeing the fans, seeing the ex-players, and hopefully seeing that club getting back to where it needs to be.
Yeah. Did you ever cross paths with Mark Robbins?
But then I used to play football against Mark Robbins. We're the same age, so he used to play for Man United, and I was at Wigan, so we used to play against each other in the under-18s.
Oh, okay.
So we sort of only as not friends, you know what I mean, just as opponents,
Yes.
and then come across each other in the first team game. Obviously, played against him a number of times.
He was a bit of a prodigy, wasn't he?
He was the goal scorer. He was the fox in the box. Yeah, that's what he was. So that was one of them for me, where it was the challenge, and you used to relish that challenge of trying to stop him scoring.
Yeah. Well, shall we call it a day, Claudio? That was a tremendous interview, and really appreciate your time, Peter. And I hope you and Ian get fixed up with a club. And if not, you'll have to come down to Legends Day again, won't you?
Yeah, it's not a bad excuse, but hopefully we'll find something soon. But you miss it, and it's a shame when you're not in it. So, but certainly I'll be watching all my ex clubs in the meantime, and hopefully they all do well in the coming season.
Yeah.
Well, if you enjoyed this, remember to like and subscribe, and also if you want to contact Jim at what is it, Jim? Get it up on the bottom. There you go.
ClarryBorton@gmail.com.
And more than happy to talk about anything to do with Coventry City's history. Of course, we'll get some more former players on as well and talk about their time at this magnificent club and about their career and how they shaped our history, Jim. That's about right, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
And remember to go to the archives as well, which Ed Blackerby contacted me today to say it's absolutely fantastic because I asked him about the programme Leamington is going to search for it. And he said the archives are tremendous. So where can people see the archives?
It's a website. It's skybluearchive.co.uk. And we've now got the match database going right back to 1919. It's really come on leaps and bounds in the last few months. So really exciting.
Brilliant. So Peter, yet again, thank you so much for coming on and spending some time with us. And we'll be back, I think, next week, won't we, Jim?
We will.
We will be. So thanks very much. And ta-ra all.
Thanks, fellas.
Thanks, Peter.
All the
Bye-bye.
best.
88 company dismissed. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. Thank you. Lovely.
Whoa.